It will keep us warm through the night.
Will the monsters stay away?
The storm is coming!
We must get inside.
And for you who have made it this far, allow me to tell you a small story, one that will help you understand how life truly was thousands of years ago. I promise you won't regret it. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to live more than 50,000 years ago in a wild world where every single day was a battle for survival? No electricity, no modern tools, no shelter, only instinct, nature, and the will to live. This is the story of humanity's very first builders, the prehistoric men. The wind cut through their skin like icy blades. Nights were long and dangerous, and the simple act of sleeping could mean death. It was a time when the distant roar of a predator was enough to make your heart race. But it was in this brutal world that humankind learned one of the most important lessons in its history: the art of building shelter. Among stones, trunks, and leaves, the first human dwellings emerged, simple yet vital, a symbol of adaptation, intelligence, and unity. The need was clear: to protect themselves from the cold, the rain, wild animals, and even other human groups. Nature was unforgiving. Those who didn't learn didn't survive. Imagine a small tribe gathered by the riverbank. The sun begins to set, and the smell of wet earth fills the air. Men and women work side by side, carrying branches, stones, and animal hides. The tribe's leader studies the ground and chooses the right spot, high enough to avoid floods, but close enough to the water to ensure survival. They begin by digging small pits in the ground, placing wooden stakes that would form the skeleton of their shelter. Then they weave branches and vines, creating a firm structure resistant to the wind. For covering, they use large, thick leaves, clay, and even animal skins. The clay dries under the sun and hardens, becoming a natural shield against the cold nights and the rain. These primitive huts were small, sheltering 3 to 6 people, and they became the heart of the tribe. There they told stories, healed wounds, and guarded the fire, their most precious possession. The fire wasn't just warmth, it was life. It was their meeting place, their tool for cooking, lighting, and keeping predators away. Keeping the fire alive was a sacred mission. Losing it could mean a death sentence. But shelter was only the beginning. Without food, none of this would matter. The days of prehistoric humans began with a single thought. What will we eat today? Hunters would set out in groups at dawn, following tracks in the mud, claw marks on trees, and the distant rumble of herds in motion. Their spears were made of fire-hardened wood, sharpened with stones. A successful hunt could guarantee meat for days, but failure could mean hunger or even the loss of a tribe member. Women and children also played a vital role. They gathered fruits, roots, seeds, and edible plants, learning, generation after generation, to tell food from poison. Each discovery was a small step toward knowledge. And survival. Sometimes hunts took days. Hunters followed their prey across forests, rivers, and plains. When they finally brought down a large animal, like a deer or a boar, the return was celebrated. The sound of drums echoed through the hills, and the tribe gathered around the fire, giving thanks to the spirits of nature for their generosity. But nature was not only a source of food, it was also a constant threat. Storms, harsh winters, floods, and droughts shaped the behavior and beliefs of these people. They learned to respect the balance between life and death, between the hunt and the earth itself. During the rains, their straw and clay houses turned into trenches of survival. Men reinforced the structures with thicker logs, while women sealed cracks with leaves and moss. The fire was protected with stones, and the elders told stories about the thunder, believing it was the gods speaking to humankind. With every storm they survived, the tribe grew stronger. They learned, adapted, and reinvented their way of living. And it was like this, little by little, that the first villages, the first human communities began to emerge. For prehistoric man, the earth was more than just a place. It was mother, shelter, and spirit. Every stone used in construction, every branch cut, carried meaning. They believed that the forces of nature had to be respected, and for that reason, they built using what it provided, wasting nothing. Life together was simple, yet profound. At night, under the shimmering starlight, the elders told stories about legendary hunts, animal spirits, and the secrets of fire. The children listened in silence, dreaming of the day they would hunt their first animal or raise their own hut. These simple dwellings, made of clay, wood, and courage, were the beginning of everything. From huts came villages, from villages came civilizations, and it all began with the instinctive act of a human trying to protect themselves from the wind and rain. With every shelter built, prehistoric man affirmed a fundamental truth. I belong to this world, and I can shape it. Have you ever stopped to think about the exact moment when humankind stopped merely surviving and began truly living? When the fear of tomorrow gave way to the hope of a future. It was when humans learned something extraordinary, to stay in one place. After centuries wandering in search of food and shelter, groups began to realize that some regions were more fertile, safer, and had everything they needed: rivers, game, wood, and stone. The idea of staying and of building something lasting was born. Thus emerged the first permanent human settlements, small prehistoric villages where the fire never went out. These communities were the beginning of society as we know it today. Over time, observing nature became a form of wisdom. Humans noticed that when seeds fell near their camps, some began to sprout again. That simple realization would change the course of humanity forever, the birth of primitive agriculture. Now, food could be planted and harvested. That meant they no longer had to live constantly hunting and migrating. The village began to grow. The houses, once made of branches and leaves, became sturdier. The walls were reinforced with clay and stones. The roofs were covered with layers of dry straw and clay. Every detail was carefully planned, and the knowledge of generations was passed down from father to son, from elder to apprentice. Humanity was beginning to master the environment around them, and for the first time, they could truly call a place home. At night, when the sky filled with stars, the village glowed with dozens of small fires. The smell of roasted meat and cooked roots mixed with the sound of voices, stories, laughter, and even prayers to the invisible gods of the forest. The elders taught the young about the seasons, the cycles of the moon, and the signs of rain. Every piece of knowledge was precious. They knew that understanding nature was the key to survival, and it was within this spirit of unity that the first social organizations emerged. There were leaders, usually the wisest or the strongest, skilled hunters, gatherers, and even healers. Everyone had a role, and for the first time in history, humans learned the power of cooperation. Human intelligence never stopped evolving. What was once just a rough stone began to take shape. They learned to chip, sharpen, and mold stones to create more efficient spears, axes, knives, and arrowheads. The age of chipped stone gave way to the age of polished stone, the mark of a silent revolution. These tools didn't just help with hunting. They also allowed for more precise construction. Houses began to have sturdier foundations, ventilation holes, and strategically placed entrances facing away from the wind. Some villages, located in colder regions, used animal skins to insulate the interiors and preserve warmth. Man was no longer just an inhabitant of the world. He was becoming its architect. The great turning point came when humans began to observe the animals they hunted. They realized that some were less aggressive and easier to control. Gradually, they learned the art of domestication. First dogs, then goats, sheep, and oxen. The dog became man's first loyal companion. It guarded the camp, helped during hunts, and warned of approaching danger. The other animals provided milk, hides, and meat. Because of this, the tribe no longer depended entirely on the luck of the hunt. Their food supply became more stable, and life a little less uncertain. But nature continued to test their limits. Summer brought abundance, but winter punished them with cold and scarcity. The villagers began to realize they needed to store food. They built primitive granaries, holes in the ground, lined with leaves and stones, to preserve grains and dried meat. It was the birth of survival storage. When storms arrived, families gathered together for safety, protecting themselves from the wind and thunder. The fire, carefully tended, kept burning in the center of the hut. The flame was a symbol of life and knowledge. As long as it burned, humans knew there was hope. As time passed, something changed within humankind. They no longer just lived off nature. They began to understand it. The sound of thunder, the rhythm of the rains, the rising and setting of the sun. All of it began to take on spiritual meaning. The first rituals emerged, dances to thank the earth for the hunt, offerings of fruit to the land, cave paintings that told stories of courage and faith. Those paintings, discovered thousands of years later, would become the first evidence of humanity's creative mind. Art was, in a way, the first sign of something new, consciousness. Over time, building techniques became more sophisticated. Some tribes learned to stack stones to raise structures that would last for years. Others used the bones of large animals as pillars, covering them with hides and clay. The homes grew larger, and villages began to form central areas, space